Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Space Invaders tutorial. In the previous part we've got all the sprites displaying and we've got the enemy animating. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get the enemy to move. Now when we move, we either move to the right and we all move together, or we move to the left. And the way we achieve that is we change the coordinates of the sprites. If you change the coordinate of a sprite, the x coordinate of a sprite, by a positive value like +5, that sprite's going to move to the right hand side. If we change the amount by a negative value like -5, then it's going to move to the left. So what we want to do is we need to alternate between, if they're moving right, we give it a positive value to move through, and if they're moving left, then we give it a negative value. And at the start of the level, we're going to want it to move right, so we need to create a positive value. So create yourself a new variable and call this variable enemy move x. And what we do is we say, okay, at the start of the level, the enemy move x is +5, which means it will move to the right hand side each time. And then all we need to do now is every time the enemy moves, we need to move them. So what we'll do is we'll click on events. Let's create ourselves another broadcast and let's call this one enemy move. Oh, why is that not doing that? Enemy move. Broadcast enemy move. And we'll put it below the animate so it switches costume and then he moves. And then when the enemy receives enemy move, we just change their x coordinate by whatever the enemy move x is. Enemy move x. So now, if we click start and we go back here to the backdrop and click start level, there you go. You can see that they're all moving to the right hand side, which is great until we get all the way up to the edge and then they all start just piling into one another. So what we need to do here is solve the next problem, which is what do we do when they touch the right hand side or the left hand side? Well, actually that's really quite simple. All we need to do is every time that they move, we need to check that if they've gone too far. And the way we can do that is we can say, okay, if their x value is greater than 220, then they've gone too far to the right. Or if it's less than -220, they have gone too far to the left, in which case we will switch it about. So what we do here is we just do an if statement. And we need an or because we're going to check whether they're left and right. Greater than and the less one. Make sure you do greater and these crocodiles are going the right way. Otherwise, you'll have problems like I did before and it wouldn't work. And then you'd be really upset. There we go. A bit bigger. There we go. So if our x position is greater than +220, in which case they're too far to the right, or if it's less than -220, in which case they're too far to the left, in which case, if that's the case, what we need to do is we need to sort that out. And what do we need to do to sort it out? Well, it's really quite simple. We just swap it over. So there we go. If we do, then we've hit the right hand side, create ourselves a new event and broadcast change direction, change enemy direction. Good. So if we've gone too far to the right, we need to change the enemy direction. And we'll click on the stage because he's in charge of making all the other ones change direction and stuff. And when I receive change enemy direction, all we're going to do is we're going to swap the enemy move to the opposite of what it was. So if the enemy move was +5, then it needs to go to -5. If the enemy move was -5, then it needs to go to +5. Now we could use an if statement for that, but we don't have to because we can use a little bit of clever maths. And we just do this. We go, okay, set the enemy move x value to 0 minus whatever the enemy move x value is, just like that. And that's a clever bit of code, because what it means is if it was at +5, then it would be 0 minus +5, which then makes it -5. But if it was on -5, then 0 minus -5, of course, is +5. So it just flips it, which is really, really cool. So now let's try that out. What we'll also do as well is we'll move this forever here, this animation script that's controlling the animation, move it into the start level and get it out of the start clicked. So now we've got it all in the start level. So we set up the level at the top here, and then this bit controls all the animation of the enemy while we're in the level. So let's click on that. Draws all the character. And now, let's have a look. Let's see how it goes. Gets all the way to the right side. And there you go. It goes back again. Good. I was a bit worried it wasn't going to go back. Let's just check it the other way. Make sure it's going back the other way. Along. Maybe I should have not set it to a 1 second delay. But we'll see it through there. It'll go all the way and it will go back. And we'll just hide the enemy move X as well. Let's just check it's working the other way. And there we go. Brilliant. Good. There we go. Good. There we go. What we'll also do there is, that's okay. Now, at the moment, it's just moving that way and that way and that way and that way, left and right. What we also need to do is that when we swap the direction, we also need to get all of the sprites to move down a bit. So how do we do that? Well, all we do is we create ourselves another broadcast and call this one move down. Move down. Move down. There we go. Good. Broadcast move down. And then when the enemy receives move down, when I receive move down. Oh no, not enemy move. Move down. All we'll do is we'll change the Y value by -10 or something. Let's do -10. Let's try that. Good. What I'll also do now temporarily is I'll take this 1 second out and put 0.2 seconds out. There you go. That way, you'll be able to see it happening much more quickly. So we can debug it really, really easily. Let's have a look. It's going down. Good. There we go. Good. So he is going down. At the moment, there's a little bit of a glitch because when they move down, they kind of move down and across. So what we need to do is fix that. And the very easy way of fixing that, I think, is as soon as we change enemy direction, as soon as you've changed direction, we'll also give it a move, enemy move as well. So that hopefully now should stop that from doing that. Let's have a look. Oh, start level. So we'll go along, move down. There we go. Perfect. Excellent. Good. So now we've got the enemies and they're starting at the top and they're starting to move down towards the player. Brilliant. Good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get the player shooting at the enemies. And what I'll do is I'll change this 0.2 seconds to 1 second again, so it all goes a bit slowly. You're going to have to change this a few times in the game anyway, but we'll just change that back to 1 so that for when we're running the level to debug it, it's a bit easier to debug. Okay, good. So let's click on the player. And now what we want to do is we need to get the player moving. And this is really, really simple. When I receive start level, we're going to put it into a loop, and it allows you inside of that forever loop, there's just going to be 3 things to do. So let's have a look. In fact, actually, no, I'm not going to do a forever loop. We're going to do a repeat until. Oh, no, we'll do a forever loop. Let's leave that. Let's try it that way first and see what happens. Okay, so really, really nice and simple is we say, okay, if the left arrow is pressed, let's have a look. I'm going to use A and D because I'm a gamer, but you can use whatever you want. So If the A arrow is pressed, we're going to move the player to the left a bit by changing the X coordinate by -10. If the D arrow is pressed, if the D key is pressed, then we're going to change by +10. And then finally, what we're going to say is if the spacebar is pressed, then we'll shoot a bullet. Spacebar. If the space is pressed, then we will have some kind of broadcast here that says player fire or something. Player fire bullet. Very good. Excellent. There we go. Good. So let's try that now. If I click on start level, there we go. So here's our player, and he's moving to the left and the right, which is perfect. And there we go. Actually, what we'll do is let's get while we're testing it, we'll just do when start clicked, and we'll just broadcast start level while we're testing it. We'll have to change this later. When start clicked, broadcast start level, and that should allow. There you go, good, excellent. So the enemies are moving, and now my player is moving as well. Good. So now what we want to do is we want to handle this bit about the player firing a bullet. What actually happens when we fire a bullet? Well, when we fire a bullet, what we need to do is we need to get a bullet to appear here, right by the player, and then start sending him firing up there. So what we do here is we just go, okay, choose a sprite, and we're going to upload a sprite, and we're going to use the player bullet sprite, which is just there. There's my player bullet. Here he is. Way good. So there's my player bullet. And whenever I receive player fire bullet, what we're going to do is we're going to move to where the player is, spawn a bullet, and start firing upwards, which is really quite easy. So when we receive the fire bullet, we're going to go to let's just change X and Y. Now the Y there, I think is going to have to be there, about there, isn't it? Right there. Let's say about there. So what we can do is drag it to the right place where you want it to appear. And then now, if you look with the go-to, you can see the Y has already changed to what the Y should be. If not, you can always adjust that later on. So the Y value is always going to be the same because it's going to be whatever height up here the player's at, which is always fixed. The X value changes. So we're going to need to go and get the X value of the player. And the way we can do that is it's in this bit here, and we just change that to the player, and then you can see the X position of the player and put that there. Good. So when we receive fire bullet, go to that X position there, and we go to the Y position, and then once we're here, all we need to do is just start moving upwards. So we'll just keep forever. Here we go. Forever, and we're going to move upwards. So we're just going to be changing the Y coordinates by 10. Let's try that. Okay. So here we go. Press start. And there you can see it's working perfectly. So now the player is firing bullets up towards the enemies. But there's a bit of an issue at the moment because if you look here, every time I press space, it fires even more bullets and just replaces the bullet and moves him back down, which is no good. In the actual Space Invaders game, once you press fire, it literally stops you from doing anything until that bullet has been destroyed. So we need a way of checking to see if he's been destroyed and stop it from doing this if he's moving up. And the way we can do that is through the use of variables and clones. So first of all, create yourself a new variable and call it player firing. Player firing, good stuff. Player firing. And then what we do is on the player firing bit here, there, if the spacebar is pressed, and we change this here now to say, okay, if the spacebar is being pressed and the player firing is false, Player firing equals false. Then we can tell it to fire a bullet and also set the player firing to true. There we go. Oops. Player firing true. There we go. Need to also make sure as well that right at the start of the level we set player firing to false as well. Otherwise it'll never allow us to fire a first bullet. Player firing to false. There we go. And let's see how much closer that gets us there. Now let's have a look. So we run through. Perfect, good. So now it only lets us fire once. But there's a bit of an issue now because the player bullet here, when he goes there forever, he'll just keep going. We need a way of, so that once he touches the top of here, we stop this script and we tell it that player firing is false. So what we can do here is we just do an if statement and we say, okay, if we are touching the top of the screen, there we go. In fact, we could probably just do if touching edge, actually. Well, that would work, wouldn't it? Because it'll go all the way up there. If touching the edge, we'll set player firing to false. And we'll just stop this script. There we are. Stop this script. Stop this script. There we go. Good. But there's all. Let's just run that now. Let's see if that works. Here we go. And that's it. Perfect. Brilliant. Good. It's actually working really, really well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get it so that if a bullet, when I'm firing, if it hits the enemy, then the enemy gets destroyed. So this is really, really quite simple. All we need to do is, as the enemy, when we're in the level here, whenever we're running the level, let's have a look. So when I start as a clone, all we need to do, let's just pause that a minute, is forever we're going to check to see if I'm being hit by a bullet. In fact, we don't have to do, we'll do a repeat until, actually, oh no, wait until, there we go. When I start as a clone, and we're just going to wait until touching, there we go, player bullet. Wait until we're touching the player bullet. Once we're touching the player bullet, that particular sprite, what's going to happen is as soon as he touches the bullet, we need him to switch his costume to the exploding costume and wait a small amount of time and then delete that clone and do a couple of other things. So before we can do that though, we need to go to the enemy costumes and we need to add another costume. So click on upload and we're going to add the explosion costume. There's our explosion costume. You can see it just about there. And what we need to say is, okay, wait until we're touching the player bullet. As soon as we touch the player bullet, we switch costumes to the explosion. Switch to costume explosion. There we go. Wait a small amount of time, like, I don't know, 0.3, 0.2 seconds. And then we delete this clone. Delete clone. Delete this clone. But we also, as well as deleting the clone, because we've exploded, we also need to tell the player tell the player and the bullet that they've hit something, so that the player can fire another bullet, and so that the bullet can disappear. So how do we do that? Well, that's actually really quite simple. We do another broadcast, and the broadcast is enemy killed. Enemy killed, there we go, enemy destroyed. And when we receive the enemy killed, the bullet needs to hide. When I receive enemy killed, the player bullet needs to hide. So we'll do hide, because we don't want to show him anymore. And we also need to stop other scripts to stop this one. So what we do here is we just stop other scripts in this sprite. Where's that one gone? Oh, there it is. Stop other scripts in this sprite. Good. Okay, so as soon as the enemy is killed, we hide the bullet and we stop other scripts in the sprite. That also means that if we're going to do that, whenever we fire the bullet, we are. We need to show the bullet here as well, otherwise it won't do. And the enemy killed also is once the enemy's killed as well, stop the other scripts. We also need to set the player firing to false as well. So set player firing to false. And that hopefully now should fix all that where it shoots the enemies. Let's find out. Okay, here we go. A little bit glitched where it started on the explosion screen, but that doesn't really matter. Let's have a look. Let's see if this works. Okay, so we move left and right. We fire. There we go. And it's got a slight issue now because for some reason we're shooting all of the... There we are. Boom. You can see there it's going all the way through. And I know exactly why that is. The reason that is because I broadcasted the enemy killed after I waited 0.2 seconds. So let's just swap that round, unless you want these really explosive bullets. Let's try that again, shall we? There we go. And there you go. You can see that now it's working, I think, perfectly, actually. Oh, yeah, brilliant. Good. So we can move around. We can shoot there. And the enemies now are getting shot by the player quite effectively. Good. We're not dealing with any scoring or anything yet, but that's not a problem. We can deal with the scoring and stuff like that in a bit. Good. So that's the first part here of the enemy. The player is shooting at the enemy, and the enemy is animating. Now what we want to do is we want to move on to the bit where the enemy starts to shoot at the player. But we'll pause the tutorial there for part 2, and we'll look at the enemy shooting in part 3. Okay,